This is a story about the buried wife.
One day an old woman got sick,
and her husband spent every second beside her. Later on, she was pronounced dead.
She was the man's one true love,
and he was devastated.
She was then buried the next day.
The husband was so sad, he tried to jump on the casket when it was getting lowered.
The man then returned back to his house,
lonely and miserable. That night, a strange scratching sound woke him up. It was getting louder and louder, and he didn't know where it was coming from. When he turned over in his bed, he was met by a terrifying sight.
He saw a figure of a woman standing outside his window.
With fear, he realized it was his wife. When he ran to the window, she vanished. He called the doctor and begged for his wife's grave to be dug up. But the doctor said no, and said he was just struggling with stress.
But he kept seeing her at the same window every night.
The man had enough and went to go dig her up on his own. When he reached the coffin, he opened the lid and stepped back in horror.
His wife's face had a frozen scream.
The coffin was filled with scratches, and her fingers were worn down to the bone. This is the creepy story about Where Is She?
There was a little girl who lived in an apartment building.
One day she told her mom she was going to play with her friends. Hours later, the mom went to go get her daughter, but she was nowhere to be found. She then asked all her friends if any of them have seen her daughter. They all said we haven't seen her all day, and then the mom realized her daughter was missing. She then called the police, who conducted a whole search of the building. But sadly, the girl was never found. 3 months went by, and the residents of the complex started to complain about the water.
They said it had a very strange odor.
More and more people started to complain, saying it smelled bad and tasted horrible. So the janitor went to the roof and checked the water tanks. When he opened the tank, he was hit with a very bad smell. He looked down and saw the decomposing body of a young child. The police came and identified it was the girl who went missing 3 months ago. Her corpse was in there undisturbed for 3 months, and the whole apartment building was drinking the water that had a rotten corpse floating in it. Nobody knows how she got there, and the mother was devastated. This is a creepy story about Smiley Face.
One night a girl was at a nightclub with her friends.
She was drinking and dancing all night. Her and her friends decided to leave around 3 in the morning. She said goodbye to her friends and started to go home.
She couldn't get a taxi, so she walked home.
On the way home, she had to pass a park.
It was very dark.
All she could hear was her shoes clacking against the road. She thought she saw somebody moving in the bushes, so she quickened her pace. Suddenly, a man behind a bush jumped out and blocked her path. His face was hideous. The girl tried to run, but he cornered her and grabbed her arms. The girl was screaming for her life and was begging him to let her go, but the man's deformed face twisted into a creepy grin.
The man said, "Do you want death or smiley face?"
She cried out, "Please just let me go." Then the man said death or smiley face again. The girl didn't know what he meant, so she replied smiley face. Then the man pulled out a knife and sliced the girl's corners of her mouth all the way up to her ears.
Now she had the same deformed smile as the man.
This is a scary story about the dancing girl.
There was a girl who was very good at dancing.
Her mom was very proud of her and had very big plans for her daughter. But those plans were shattered when her daughter got diagnosed with terminal cancer. The doctor said she had less than a year to live. As months went by, the girl's condition worsened. She was unable to walk or even stand up. She spent all of her time laying in bed. But one night the mom was downstairs watching TV when she heard thumping noises coming from her daughter's room. She raced upstairs and opened the door and was shocked when she saw her daughter out of bed, moving around.
The girl was jumping and dancing around the room,
as if she was healthy again. The mom went and grabbed the camera and took pictures until the camera was out of film. When the girl finished dancing, the mother looked at her face.
Her eyes were in the back of her head and she was very pale.
She then took her to the hospital and she was pronounced dead. The mother was devastated. After the funeral, the mom was looking through the photos, but she started shaking and dropped the photos. In the photos, there was a ghostly hand holding her by her head and forcing her to dance. This is a creepy story about Left Behind.
One night, a girl was waiting at a bus stop after work.
As she stood there waiting for the bus, she got a strange feeling that she left something behind, but she had no idea what it was. When the bus came, all the seats were full, so she had to hang on to the handrail. She then bumped into a man. She said, "I'm sorry," but he just looked away. More and more she felt that she left something very important back at the office. The further the bus carried her from the office, the more certain she became she left something behind. She then went over the whole day in her head, but couldn't think of anything that she could have left behind. She told herself she will feel better when she gets home, but the feeling of forgetting something didn't leave. When she got off the bus on the street of her house, she finally gave in and decided to go back to the office to see what she'd forgotten. She got back on the bus and went back to the office. When she arrived, she ran up the stairs and opened the office door. She then stopped in her tracks in horror and recognized it was herself that she left behind. Her dead body was laying strangled on the floor. This is a creepy story about I Need Money. There was 3 friends that grew up together. They were best friends. They always said to each other, "Best friends till the end." Kyle was the responsible one, Dave was the nerdy one, and Jimmy was the wild one.
But Jimmy had a real bad addiction to gambling.
Specifically poker, and he kept losing and losing. It got to the point where he owed very bad men $30,000, and if he didn't pay them, they would kill him. Jimmy went to Kyle and Dave and explained the situation. Jimmy was desperately crying. He needed their help bad. And then they all said best friends till the end and they agreed to help him. Jimmy had a plan to rob a bank. They were all gonna wear masks and take out 2 security cameras with spray paint.
They were gonna hold the bank up
And walk away with at least $50,000. However, when they made it to the bank,
a van in front of them screeched to a stop,
and 8 armed men hopped out of the van and kidnapped them. Kyle and Dave were on the floor in the back of the van when Jimmy looked back and said, "I'm sorry guys, but I need more than $50,000 and the Oregon market is booming these days." This is a scary story about the waiter.
One night a girl went out on a blind date.
Her date took her to a restaurant. Although the man was very nice, she wasn't into him at all. Halfway through the meal, she was so bored. She was already thinking of excuses so she could leave early. The waiter could tell she was bored and kept smiling and winking at her. When the girl's date was in the restroom, the waiter came over and started to ask her if she was okay. She explained she was on a blind date and that she wasn't having too much fun.
It turned out the waiter was just about to get off work,
and he offered to give her a ride home if she waited 10 more minutes. She considered it and was very tempted to say yes, but her date was coming back from the bathroom. She shook her head and smiled at the waiter and told him no thanks. The next night,
the girl was watching the news,
and they were saying a woman got murdered behind a restaurant last night. She realized it was the same restaurant she was at with her date. They then said the police already caught the killer. When the picture came up on the screen,
it was the waiter who was trying to take her home.
This is a scary story about the shop.
One night a girl was walking down the street
when she saw a blind old man coming towards her. He was having trouble getting around, and he asked the girl to do him a favor. "Can you please help me deliver this letter?" the man said. Being a nice person, the girl agreed to help him. She took the letter with an address on the front of it. As the girl turned around to start walking away, she took a glance back at the blind man, who was running away and didn't seem blind at all. The girl was super suspicious, so she took the letter to a nearby police station. The police went to the address, and it was a butcher shop owned by an old couple. It was all ordinary until the police asked to open the large refrigerator in the back of the shop. The couple refused, so the police broke into it on their own. Inside of the refrigerator, they were confronted by a horrible scene.
There were countless dead bodies hung up by meat hooks
and shelves stacked with human flesh. Until now, the police overlooked the letter.
When they opened the envelope,
it contained one chilling line. It said, "This is the last one I'm sending you today." This is the scary story about Room for One More.
A woman just started a new job in an office building.
She was walking to work one day
when a black hearse drove up next to her slowly,
matching her walking. This made her extremely nervous as she watched it out of the corner of her eye. The driver then leaned out the window with a booming voice saying, "Do you need a lift?" She turned and looked at him and got a terrible feeling when she saw his face. He was extremely hideous and deformed. His skin was deathly pale and his one eye was higher than the other. The man pointed to the back of the car, which contained a coffin, and he said, "Room for one more." The girl then refused his offer because of his frightening appearance and then ran the rest of the way to work. The whole day at work, she couldn't stop thinking about the man. She works on the 9th floor. She was gonna take the elevator down, but it was completely full. She hesitated for a second when she heard somebody ask, "Are you sure you don't want to come in? There's room for one more." It was the same man from earlier. She then got terrified and said she'll take the stairs. When she got to the bottom,
she saw that the elevator cable broke and everybody on it fell to their death.
This is the scary story about the red birthmark.
There was a 3-year-old boy who lived in a small village.
He was born with a red birthmark on his forehead, and as soon as he was old enough to talk, he told his family that he lived before. He pointed to the birthmark on his forehead and said a man murdered him with an axe.
His parents then took him to the village
where he claimed he lived before.
The boy said he remembered his old name,
and it was the same name of the man who went missing from the village 4 years earlier. He then showed them the house where he lived. The boy remembered what the man who killed him looked like, and also his name.
When he saw the man,
he walked right up to him and said, "I used to be your neighbor. We had a fight and then you killed me with an axe." The man immediately turned white. Then the boy said, "I even know where he buried my body." They then followed the boy to a field, and they stopped in front of a pile of rocks. They all moved the rocks, and underneath there was a skeleton, with a wound on the skull,
exactly where the boy's red birthmark is.
After that, the man broke down and confessed to the murder.
유난히도 캄캄한 밤에 나 홀로 너를 생각하네. 이런 기분 설명할 수 없어. 원래 이맘쯤 너와의 여행을 생각해 됐었는데 네가 좋아하던 와인과 선물을 준비했겠지. 기뻐할 너를 상상하며 근데 왜 이런 생각을 하면서 너를 추억만 하게 된 건지 어쩌다 너